So when we say object-oriented programming, so it's most widely used paradigm whenever you're writing a scalable applications. Uh, be it any tool which you're using, if you see backend of side of that, it is generally developed using your object-oriented principle. Now, when I say object-oriented programming, I will represent entire code using class and object entity. Now, what is my class? So, class can be any real-world entity. So the representation, so if I say the perspective wise, now the person who is thinking about the class, you might have different perception of how you are going to implement the class. So when I say class, so I will define a class in which I will work on some of the data part, and in order to work on this data, I will have few methods. So let's take an example. So let's say I'm working on a class called employee. Now, in every organization, for an employee, I should have few specific values. Let's say our employee ID, then there should be a name. Let's say contact number. Let's say we are student department. So this is the data. Now, if I say every employee, it will have this set of values. Now, to work on this data, I will have few methods. Let's say I want get details. I want the details of every employee. So if I say employee 1, it should give me all the details. Let's say I can have something called increment the salary of an employee, so appraisal process. Then I can have methods to, let's say, update the details. So these are my methods and this is my data. Okay. So how we can implement object-oriented programming in Python. So here, if I define a structure, so when I say class, I will be defining the structure for a class. And now I can create something called objects. So my employee 1, employee 2, employee 3, this will be my objects, so that every employee should have all these attributes. And for every employee, I should have access to all these methods. So I want to create a structure something like this. So in Python, to create a class, we have a keyword called class. Okay, you will define a class name. Now it is standard convention that start your class name with a capital letter. Okay. So this is again your prepared guideline. Put a colon, and you will write a structure here. Okay. So for now, I'm not writing anything. I'm just saying pass. Okay. So how to create an object of this particular class? Just specify your object name. Let's say this is employee 1, and you will write your class name as a function. Okay. So here, if I just print now this employee 1, it will show okay, it is the object of an employee class. Okay, so how you can define a class? We have a keyword class and a class name. Again, colon, that means you are specifying a block of statements. Then how to create object? You will specify your object name and you will specify this class name. You will give a call to this class. Okay, so what happens in the background? Whenever you give this particular function call using class, in the background, Python implicitly give a call to one of the method called init. So whenever you create an object, something like this, give a call to your class, it will defaultly implicitly give a call to this particular method. This was on the background. Yeah. So so this particular method is getting called every time you create an object. So now if I say employee 2 and employee, so for this particular object, it will execute this. For this particular object, it will execute this. Okay. I'm specifying 2 underscores here. So it is underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Now In Python community, these two underscores are also known as dunder. As we are pronouncing it two times, so you can say it as dunder, init, dunder methods.
What is the define?
Sorry, I will come to that, what we mean by it. Okay. So in Python, if you see any method with this double underscores, the meaning of that is you will not give a call to this particular method.
So explicit call to the
Yeah. So Python will implicitly give a call to this particular function. So in this case, when you create an object, defaultly it is giving a call to this init method.
there is a tree like we call we create an object in it. Then we will call this.
Exactly. Okay. Now just come back to your basics. So whenever you define a string, okay, this one is equals to, let's say, right, s2 is equals to string. Okay. When you say print s1 plus s2, okay, so you are using this plus operator here, right? So now how to check a type? We have method type, right? So far we were just focusing on the string part. Just have a look here. So it's a class string. So in Python, I do not have any primitive data. Everything is implemented as a class. Okay. So ultimately, when you write this s1 plus s2, okay, in the background we have a method called underscore underscore add underscore underscore. Okay. So Python implicitly it is giving a call to this particular method. Okay. So now if I just do help of str, so all the methods which are displayed at the top. Okay. So first method is your add method. You have this underscore underscore, that means you are not supposed to give a call to this particular method. The call to this will be implicit. So when you try to add two strings, in the background it is giving the call to this method. So similarly, this is your equal to method, greater than. So all these operators which we have are implemented as a method in the background. Okay. Come back here again.
One basic question: how do you differentiate between a function and a method?
So we don't have a much difference in that, okay? But it's just that when I move to object-oriented concepts for a particular class, I call it as a method. But in terms of my procedural programming, I generally call it as a function. But ultimately, the operation will be same. There will be a function. I'll be passing a value, and I'll expecting some input. Okay. So this init method you can use to initialize your object to a particular state. Okay. So let's say when I create an employee, I just want to save that employee ID for this employee is 101. Okay. Let's say I'm storing the name. Name is, let's say, ABC. The contact number is, let's say, abc@gmail.com. Okay. So I want to initialize these three values for this particular object. Now what are these three values? ID, name, and email ID. So in order to store these three values, I need three variables, right? Now here we have a concept of something called instance variable and class variable. Okay. So what is instance variable? If I want a variable for which there will be an individual set of copies for every object. So when I say employee 1, my employee 1 should have a set of employee ID, name, and email ID field. When I say employee 2, there should be a separate copy of variable employee ID, name, and email ID for that.
So this should correspond to the class definition.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Whatever like we have defined.
Defining, I need to map it to my particular definition.
And will it be correspond to like the sequence in which the object, like the object definition has to be?
Yeah. So execution will be line by line only. So it will not execute class directly. It will start from a global scope. So initially, first it will create this object and okay. So instance variable, that means every object will have its own set of variables.
Just to define a bit on this one instance variable, how do you define that? Like, if the authority asks what is an instance variable, what's the answer for that?
So in technical term, it's like for every object, if I need a set of variable copies, independent for that object, that is my instance variable. So in this case, let's say I'm creating an employee object, right? Now for employee, every object, I should have a separate variable for employee ID, for employee name, and the email ID. Okay. So in short, let's say I'm creating something employee one, and for this I have variable ID, name, email. Okay. If I create another employee, I should have another set of ID, name, email. If I create third employee, for this particular employee, I should have its own copy of ID, then name and email. Okay. If I want such structures, then I require an instance variable. But if I want a single copy, let's take example of count. So I want total number of employees in a class, okay, in an organization. Now it will be a single copy. So whenever I create an object, I should increment this count value, right? Even if employee one goes and check what are the total number of employees in my organization, I should get only one value. Even if I go with employee two, I should get a single value. So if I want something for which there will be only one copy, okay, shared among all the objects, then such variables are called as your class variable.
Local variables.
Uh-huh.
Class variables means local variables, right?
No, it's we can call it as a global variable, or in Java, if you want to compare it, is your static variable.
Static is a shell for the program.
So for across all entire class, you'll have only one copy of that variable.
But name, ID, and email are different. If you want some other,
so if you want to map it to Java, so when you create a class, you call it as let's say private string name. Private. So all the variable which you are defining at the top as a private, these are my instance variable. Okay. But if I define a variable as a static variable, now there will be a single copy of that variable, and I will be accessing using a class name. Okay. So I want this structure. So for now, I have created an object, let's say employee, and I want to initialize this to this particular set of values. So I need to, so we discussed that whenever I create an object like this, it will defaultly give a call to this init method. Now in Java, we have a concept of constructors to initialize the object, but in Python, your init method acts as a constructor. Okay. So whatever values I'm giving here, so it's like now for me a normal function call, and I'm passing how many values? 3 different values. Let's say ID, let's say name, and let's say email. Okay, so I'm passing 3 values here, and I'm accepting 3 values. Okay, so but I said every time I create an object, it will give a same function call. Right? So now how Python will differentiate that for exactly which object I need to store these values, right? Because it's a confusion. Every time I create a new employee, it's going to call same method. I have same set of parameters, right? So for which exact object it should store all these values, right? So that is the reason when you give a call like this, in the background, it will pass the instance as a first object, as a first parameter on this. So you are calling the class. So first thing it will pass is the object, and then all your values. Let's say ABC, and then sorry, it will pass 101, and then ABC, and then your humanity, something like this. Okay. So in short, now you are passing 3 values, but actually in the background you are passing 4 values. Now if you are passing 4 values, you have to accept 4 values. Okay.
4 values.
So the first argument always is your object. So Python is implicitly passing first argument as an object. Okay. So now if I'm passing 4, I need to accept 4 here. So defaultly, your first argument is considered as an object. So but here I'm only specifying three values. If I try to execute this, it will throw me an error. So by convention, generally your object is called as your self. So you can refer this self as a this pointer. This in your Java. Okay. So now when I say self, so every time if I give call to this employee1 using employee1, now this self will be your employee1. If I'm calling employee2 using this class, then for a self it will pass employee2. Okay. So in short, I am passing the values and I am passing the object also. Okay. So far we have just passed the values, we haven't stored it anywhere. So what I'm doing now, I'm creating variables. So let's say self.employee ID and is equal to ID. Okay, so just have a look here. So far I have passed these values, I accepted these values, right? Now it's time to store all these values for this particular object. Now this particular object is passed as a self. So what I'm saying, create a copy of employee ID variable for this particular object, that is employee1, and store the employee ID value which is passed, that is I'm passing it as a ID. Then create another variable called employee name and store value name which is passed. Then create employee email as a separate variable for this particular object and store this email value. Okay. So
this is how it's been.
Yeah. Okay. So Pratap, for you, I'll just give you the overview. Okay. So how you can define classes and objects in Python. So I will define a class keyword, okay, and any user define a class name. Okay. So standard convention, I have to start it with a capital letter. Okay. So I define a class. Now to create an object, I just need to write the object name and a class name like this. So it's like a function call form. Okay. So when I give a call to this object, in the background, it actually gives a call to this particular method called init. So the call to this particular method is an implicit call. So Python itself is giving a call to this particular method. So what is the use of this method? I can use this particular method to initialize a particular object. So let's say I'm creating one employee and I want to store values that employee ID is 101, name is ABC, and the email is abc@gmail.com. So I want to store all these values for this particular object. So what happens in the background, when you give a call to this employee, Python automatically passes the object as a first attribute. Okay, so you are writing a call like this, but in the background it will pass this particular object also. Now for this particular object, I want to create a different set of variables. Let's say employee ID. So, but what is this object? So I'm referring this object using self. So this self.employee ID is equals to ID, that is the value which I'm passing here. Then self.employee name, that is the name which I'm passing here. And then the email ID which I'm passing here. Okay, so every time now I create object, it will give a call to this init method, and for that particular object, it will set these three variables. So let's say I created employee1. Similarly, let's create employee2.
Yes, self-employee ID is there. That is capital employee.
Which one? This one?
Employee ID, EMP.
So it's a class name. So this is my object name. This can be anything, right? This is object name. This should be your class name.
Okay, there.
Where?
Near self dot employee.
Here. Now these are the variables I am creating.
Okay.
Okay, so these are my user defined name. It's not mandatory that I need to write it as class name and underscore anything. Oops. This can be anything, so I can create like this also. That is fine. Okay. So this is my first object. Let's create the second one. Let's say PQR, and let's call it as PQR at the rate of Gmail. Okay. So if I execute this now, so by now it has created two objects and stored all these values. So if you want to check these values, you can try like this. So I want to print, let's say employee1 dot. Now all the variables, all the methods which I have defined for this particular class, I can access it using this dot operator. So object dot and the variable name, let's say employee ID. I want employee1 dot, let's say employee name. Okay, and employee1 dot, I guess we're using only emails. So try the same thing for employee2. So now if I execute this, it will print me all the values which it has stored. So these are my instance variables. So how you will create an instance variable? So you'll always create an instance variable with self. So whatever variable name you are defining with a self dot and the variable name, now that is an instance variable. That means every object will have its own copy of that particular variable. So here I created two objects. So when I create this, give a call to this method, in the background it will go to this method and initialize these three variables for me. Okay. When I create employee2, at the same time it will again give a call to the same method with a different set of input values. Now for this particular object, it will set all these three values. Okay. So now I'm printing these two values. So so far we have used object-oriented programming without much knowledge of it. So if I define a method, let's say s is equals to Python, okay. And when I say print type of s, it will print me class string. Okay, the method which I am defining. So let's say I am saying s dot index of p. Okay, so it returns me the index. Now you are calling it as s dot index. So have a look. So what you are exactly creating? So when you say s is equal to Python, you are actually creating an object of a class string. Okay. Now when you say s dot index, you are actually calling a method of this particular class. Okay, with this set of input values. Okay. So that is the reason for every string we are using this s dot. So whatever method which are defined as an instance method, you are accessing as the variable name and dot. Okay. And so going forward, we will discuss something. So remember this method from keys. Anyone? Exactly. So if I have a list and if I want to construct a dictionary from this, then we use this method dictionary from keys, right? But to access this method, we return something dictionary dot from keys. That means we are specifying here the class name, right? So we have few things like instance method and the class methods. Okay? So we'll discuss these things also. Okay. So ultimately, everything in a Python is an object. Okay. So even all the primitive data types and everything is an object in Python. So let's define another method. So let's define a few more methods. So here we are writing all these details manually, right? So let's say I want the details of all the employees, I need to write it separately. So instead of that, what I'm saying that I want a method which will give me details. So if I give a call to that particular method using the object, for that particular employee, it should fetch me all the details. So I can define any number of methods inside a class now. So I'm writing def, let's call it as get details. Okay. So your first argument should be self. Okay. Now when I specify the first argument as a self, that means I need to access this particular method using a particular object. Okay. So now here, instead of this, how it should work, if I say print employee1 dot get details, then it should print me all the detail of that particular employee. Okay. So I am passing this object. So here, if I'm not passing anything, right, but I'm giving a call of get details. So now how Python will know for exactly which employee I need to fetch a detail. So that's why this object, it will pass as a first argument implicitly. So that is the reason you need to accept your get details any method with the first argument as self. Even if you are not passing anything, your first argument will be self. So what I want for this particular object, I want the stored employee ID, stored employee name, and the email ID. So here I'm just saying return self.employee ID, self.employee name, self. Okay. So now if I give a call, so it will get me all the details. So every time if I need a detail, all I need to do is, so
But like in general, like you always define the instance variables on our own, or is it
so it's like if you take a real world example, if you have any website, okay, you register for that particular website. Now when you register for a website, you are an object. Okay, so now it will give you all the methods which or that particular user can do. You are an object, now you can log in, you can log out, you can access the information. So it's like end user is automatically creating the object.
No, but like my question was that this like right now we defined the subs.emp ID and all we we are writing it explicitly. We're doing it explicitly in the program, in the class definition. So like in normal, like do we do that or like in
yes. It will be the same. It will be the same.
So this get details we can do it outside the init also, or like
yeah, so outside the class definition.
Outside the class.
Yeah. So I'll come back to this access modifiers and everything. Yeah, how we can prevent it. Okay, so I can define a method to get the details of anything. Okay, so in Python, how you can define an instance variable. So it's not mandatory to always define all the instance variable in init method. Okay, the mandatory thing is you have to define all your instance variable inside a method, and that can be any method. So let's take example. I want to set a department for this particular employee. Okay, so for that I'm writing a method called set department. Again, I'm passing the first argument as self. And let's say while setting the department, I am saying employee.set department, and the department is admin or HR. So that means I'm passing the value here, right? So let's say I'm accepting as TEPT. Okay, so now whatever value I'm getting here, I want to create another variable. So if I say self dot, let's say department is equals to department value which I'm receiving from the method. Okay, so now here how I'll give a call, I will just say employee one dot set department, and let's say call it as HR. Let's say employee two dot set department, or let's say admin. So now if you see, my get detail method do not provide this value, right? So either you can modify the same method, but for now just to check it, I'm printing it separately. So I'm saying employee one dot department. Okay, so now it will store the values. Okay, one more concept, I can define something called a local variable also. So if I define a variable, let's say a is equals to 100. Okay, now this particular variable is a local variable. That means if I print it here, it's fine, it will print the value. But if I go here and if I try to get a value as print employee one dot a, it will throw me an error that employee object has no attribute a. Why? Because now a is just a local variable. If you want to define any variable as an instance variable, and when I say instance variable, that means this particular variable should be available for all the objects. Then I need to have this self dot. So now if I execute this, okay, okay, so while printing also I need to write this. Okay, now this is an instance variable. Okay, so let's say I want to create a method. Okay, if I say something like employee one dot increment salary, okay, if I pass a value 50, then are you passing salary also? Sorry. So first we need to create a set salary method which will set a salary. Then I need to give a call to this function called increment salary. So if I pass this number, then it should increment my salary with a 50%. If I do not pass anything, if I write a function call like this, then it should automatically increment it by 30%. Okay. So tell me the changes. So first thing I need to define a set salary method. Right. Right. So I'm creating a new variable that is self salary equals to this salary. Okay. So we don't need this part. Let's remove this. Okay. If I'm giving a call, then so here before this I'm saying employee one dot set salary. Okay, then let's pass some value, let's say 25K, and let's say employee two dot set underscore salary of, let's say 20K. Okay, now I need to work on this increment salary. So what I want, this method should return me the new salary. Okay, so I should get a value in this particular variable called salary. So if I do not pass anything, increment it by 30%, otherwise increment it by 50%. So Tell me. So I want to increment it by that particular pattern. Mm-hmm. So this is increment salary. All right. So my first argument will be self. All right. Let's say call it as a percentage. Okay. But I'm saying if I do not pass this, it should take 30% value. Alright, so what I'm doing, I'm setting the default value for this now. Okay, alright. Now, do I need to create a new variable or can I modify the existing one? Okay, yeah. So existing salary plus I need to calculate the
multiply by 1.3.
But I cannot guarantee it will be fixed, that is 50 or 30 always, right? I can pass 70 also. So original salary into percentage. Let's divide this by 100. Okay, this should do fine, but I want this value to be returned. And I'm saying return salary. Okay. So let's see if this is working. So what are the values we are studying? So it's in 45 and 20. What is our okay, so now it's incrementing my salary by is my percentages. Yeah, we can write everything, no problem. Okay. So let's say for the employee, now I want to add some skill sets. Okay. So the languages that particular person knows. Okay. So again, I want to create. So I want to set two things. One is experience, and one is the skill set. Okay. And then let's say I want a person having 3 years of experience, and in skill set, if that person knows Python, and let's say SQL. Okay. So first thing, let's create multiple employees so that we can test it well. Right. So I'm creating third employee, and I'm creating fourth employee. So I created 4 employees. Okay. So I want to set total experience and I want to set a skill set. Yeah. Tell me methods. So again, let's say set DXP. My first argument will be self, and I'll pass some experience for this. And I'm saying self.exp is equals to exp. Okay. And similarly, I want to create a method called skill set. Let's say skills. I'll pass self, and I'll be passing the list here. of skills. Okay, so here I'm saying self.skills is equals to skills. Okay. So then here I'm saying employee one dot set experience first. Let's go. I'm copying this 3 and 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 10, 8. Okay. I need to set the skill set. So I'm saying employee one dot, let's say set skills. So I need to pass a list of all the skill set. So let's say I'm passing this as a Python. Let's say I'm passing it as a SQL. Let's say I'm passing it as Django, something like this. Okay. Copy this. So for second employee, let's say Python. Let's say computer science. And let's say 2 to 3, something like this. And let's say Python SQL, we will keep it both. And let's call it as Part. Okay. And here let's call it as Squad, something like this. Okay. Execute this, working fine. Okay. So now from this all the objects, oops, let's create employee 3 and okay. So what I want to search employees having experience more than 3 years and knowledge on Python and SQL. So do we have anyone less than 3? Let's change some of the values. Are they contradicting? Sure, let's see this. I don't know if it's okay. So I can put all these objects in a list and I can start iterating. Okay, so I can create a list as, let's say, employee 1, employee 2, employee 3, employee 4. Okay, so now I can use my for loop. So if I say for value in, instead of value, I will start using as object. Okay, so now if I print object, okay, so it's showing here it is object which contains some set of values. So now I have a structure. Now it's like running a query. I need to check that experience field and I need to check this set skill field. Okay. So from that I need to return a value. Okay, right? Yes.
Object of experience.
That's greater than equal to 3. This is one condition. And in skill set I want Python and SQL. Alright. And object dot skills equals to,
Skills in Python and integration.
so if I write something like this, Python in object dot skills, okay, and I want another condition, let's say SQL in obj dot skills. If all these conditions are satisfied, okay, then only print me the, let's say, employee name and the ID of that particular employee. So what should I write?
Object name.
Object dot, is it name or employee name? I guess employee name. Object dot employee. Okay, is it correct? So ABC and X values, so 101 and 103. This 101 and this 103. Okay. So this is how you will be working with your instance variable and the objects. Okay. So a few more additional methods. So initially when I printed object, so if I print employee, so it prints something employee object. Okay. So this is not a human readable representation. So if you want a human readable representation of an object, so same as your init method, we have something called string method. Okay. So if I define as underscore underscore str, okay, so again call to this particular method will be implicit call. You will not give a call to this, but if someone tries to print the object, it will directly call this method. Now whatever implementation you are writing in this method, it will be displayed. So this method should return a string. Okay. So I'm saying, let's say str of self dot employee ID plus. So it should be a string. That's the restriction. I cannot return a tuple. So that's why I'm concatenating it with another value, that is self dot let's say name. Okay. So now every time if I try to print object, so it will give me representation as employee ID and employee name.
Just one question regarding that and condition. I can be putting by using multiple conditions within and. So is there a limit to the maximum number of conditions?
Okay, so this is your string method, that if I put underscore underscore, again the call will be implicit, and whenever someone tries to print the object, now you can return a human readable representation.
So that normally the initial method that waits not the waiting string here. Normally when you initialize inactive, so what we get?
So defaultly I'll get an object, okay, and it will initialize this values. When I say init, so call to this init will be implicit, and it will initialize these three values. In short, it will create an object and store all these values. But when I print the object, I need to, if I want these values, I need to write employee1 dot name, employee1 dot employee ID. If I just print employee1, it will print me that this is an object of a particular class. But if I want, if someone just prints an object, then also I want a particular representation. Let's say if I print object, it should give me only employee ID or it should give me employee name. So I can override this string method for that. So all the methods which are defined with underscore underscore, the call to this methods will be implicit. You will never give a call to this methods. So automatically this method will get called. Okay. Alright. Is it complicated?
Okay.
Okay. Alright. How about you, Srinandini? Complicated?
Yes. It's just like function code.
So, let's start with access modifier. Okay. So one of the important principles of your object-oriented programming is encapsulation. That means you will try to save all your details regarding class inside a class body, and you will not expose the internal detail to the outside world. When I talk about details, I mainly talk about data. So whatever variables I have to make sure that I don't provide access to this particular variable outside the class definition, right? But we have seen if I just try to print employee1.name and employee.id, it is allowing me to get the values here, right? So if you want to restrict that, then all you have to do is just put underscore underscore at the start. So now if I put a underscore underscore at the start, that means I am defining this particular variable as a private variable for this particular class. Okay. So I'm just changing everything now. So this is also private.
So we are declaring a instance variables as private.
Exactly. General. So we will keep our methods as a public, but all the variables will be private. So are we printing somewhere? Alright. So here we are trying to print this department. Okay.
It's always like is it a convention or is it mandatory that we define all the instance variables within the
It's kind of a good programming practice. So it's a core object-oriented programming principle that generally you will keep all your variables as a private variables. Okay. So now if I try to get the value of this particular variable outside the class, I will not get the access. Okay. Even if I try to access it like this, I will not get the access. So it will say employee object has no attribute underscore underscore department. So how you can access this now? Because ultimately you need a value of this. So standard convention is for every variable you will set a getter and a setter method. Okay. So what is your getter method? If you want a value of a particular variable, then you will write a get method for this. So similarly, we have written a get details. Now it is giving me all the values, right? So similarly, I will write a getter method for all the values. So how to write a getter method? I'll just say definition get department. I'll pass self. So if I give a call to this method, so this method will return me self dot underscore underscore department. Okay. So similarly set department, so we already have a set department method. So what your set department method will do, you will pass one value and it will set it for this particular department variable. Okay, so I'm modifying it here. So if I go down, so after setting the department, if I want this department value, I will give access to get department. This is a function now. Okay, so now if I do this, I guess we have moved like this. Alright, so here we are accessing this experience variable and the skills variable, right? So I need a getter method for this. So I'm going here. I'm saying definition of get experience. So write a self. Okay, and say return self dot underscore underscore experience. Okay, and similarly I'm writing get skills. So I'll pass the object and I will say return self dot underscore underscore. Now here we are printing this values. So instead of this, for now let's give a call to this get details method. Otherwise we have to write it separately. Okay. So now I replaced my private variable call with function of getter and setter. So this is what you will do if you are defining a variable as a private. Okay. So now most important part, in Python we do not have anything called private. Okay. So exactly. So whatever we did to define a private, it's not completely private. That means it will not completely restrict accessing the private variables outside a class. Okay. If you see it in Java, when I define a particular variable as a private, I don't have any means to access that variable. But this is where Python flexibility provides. Python provides a flexibility. Even if you want, you can access a private variable. So how you will access a private variable now? So if I define an object, we have something called a namespace. Okay. So if I print this underscore underscore dictionary for a particular object, it will print me what are the variables available in this dictionary. So I defined everything as a private using two underscores. And then if I print a dictionary, it will show that all these variables, that is employee ID, employee name, and email, are saved as underscore class name double underscore variable name. Okay. So that means if I try to get a variable like this, dot underscore employee double underscore employee ID. So now it will allow me to get a value of a private variable also. Okay. So when you specify an object with a double underscore, so it's Python concept of something called object mangling. Okay. So what is object mangling? So it's just Python's mechanism to avoid confusion if you have two classes having same variable name. So it will just append the class name before the variable name. So that now even if you have two classes with the same variable employee ID, it will append a class name initially, and that is the reason your variable will remain unique. Okay. So now it completely used as a convention that if you are specifying something as a double underscore in Python, in the entire Python community, you will never try to access such variable outside the class. Okay. So it's not the restriction which Python is putting. So it is accepted by convention. Anything with a double underscore, you are not going to give a call to such methods. You are not going to access such a variable outside the class. Okay. But even if you want to, you have a way to access this. Okay. Sorry.
They have written some underscore dictionary.
Yeah. So this is called as a namespace. That means whenever I define a particular object, it will create a set of variables, right? In in this particular object, the variables which are in scope of this particular object, it will be displayed by using this underscore underscore dictionary. So this is a built-in variable for which Python is storing the value. Again, this is if I have double underscore, I'm not supposed to use this particular value. It's just to display that how it is working in the background and display.
If someone did a code and they get some variables as private, we want to know that whether they are not, if you run, you can't get right. Those private variables.
Okay. So ultimately, if someone is writing the code as a private, okay. So in Python, the good programming practice is outside the class. Even if you can access the variables using underscore class name, double underscore variable name, you will not use these variables. You will use your getter and setter methods. Okay. So at home, please try this exercise. Try to create a class called student. It will be on the similar line. Okay, so a student should have the roll numbers, name. Let's store the standard. Okay. You will store marks of 5 subjects here. Okay. So you have to store a result, and it should be either pass or fail. Okay. So for this, the methods you will need is, let's say, calculate percentage. So this will give you the percentage. Then calculate result. Okay, so this result should check if the percentage is less than 40, then call that, then store a value pass fail for that particular student. Add another parameter as attendance. Let's say if so you'll store the attendance. If the attendance is less than 75%, in calculating result, your method should return me fail. So attendance, try to store a percentage value or any floating point value. Okay, if that value is less than 75, and even if your percentage is greater than 40 but attendance less than 75, it should be in a fail category. Okay, so
what's the condition?
That result, if that person scores a mark more than 40%, but still attendance is less than 75, then it should be fail. Okay. So then I want a method which will give me all students having attendance less than 75%. Then I want list of failed students. Okay, you can create a method. Let's say calculate rank. Okay. So I want to store who is the. Okay, so you will calculate the rank based on the percentages, and you will store the rank also. And I want a method which will return who is the topper of the class, or let's say you can get first, second, and third rank from the class.
So what is the data here?
So you will be creating. So entire structure you have to create. Okay. If you want to make it more harder, then you can create your data in a file, read your file from there accordingly. So whenever you are giving the call, so you have to set that data in that file and calculate the result. Okay, so we'll not go ahead with more concept. So next time we will start with something called class variables and how to define a class variable. Then we have something called class methods. Then we have static methods. Then we have inheritance. Then we will discuss method overriding. Okay. So all these points we'll discuss in the next class. Okay. But before that, make sure you are comfortable using classes concepts. Okay. Actually requires exactly. So this is one typical topic that even if you don't practice it, you will never understand the syntax of class. You will always make mistake even if you don't practice it. So make sure you try to implement these things. Yes, if you compare it with Java, syntaxes are much more simpler. There we have a lot of things like static, then final, then we have abstract class, then we have interfaces. So we don't have that much complications.
We don't have abstraction. So after this, these topics from Moods concept, what more we have here?
So after this, we have decorators to cover. Then we have.
I say started late today. I thought it must be completed. I can.
Which one?
You started with Oops today.
Only Oops. Then we have XML and a beautiful shape. Yeah. So it's a web scraping library. Socket programming, threading, database access. Anything else? Yes. Yes, so you want this sys, OS, and subprocess also. So we'll cover this modules too. Okay. So these are the topics. One class for this. You can combine it in 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 classes.
So project stuff.
Yeah, so after this, yeah. So project will be based on your, there is some different libraries called SMTPlib and PSUtils. So after this, I'll give you the basic.
Will be covering NLTK?
No, NLTK is part of your machine learning stuff. NLTK is really cool. I mean, it's a hardly 2 page of Jupyter notebook code, and you have developed your chatbot. It's cool.